Good.
Well, 1 minute.
Well,
I won't tell anybody.
I can take that.
All right, 6 o'clock. So go ahead and call this to order. Mayor, would you give roll call, please?
Mr. Wright?
Here.
Mr. Lopez?
Here.
Mr. Hennis?
Here.
Ms. Harrington? Here. And Mr. Kirby?
Here.
And we are here for this evening for the interim superintendent search discussion and action items. And with that, Steve, the show is yours.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate being here this evening.
Oh, let me remind everybody to use your microphone.
Okay.
You don't have to use it.
I don't have to use it?
You're
Okay.
live.
You already know.
Appreciate being here tonight. A couple of months ago, you didn't know you were going to be doing this. So this is a little bit of a surprise, but our job, if you choose to use this, and you have an opportunity to vote on that a little later, is to get you through it with as less problem and trouble as you possibly can. You become the decision makers, and we become the ones who get the work done behind the scenes. With that in mind, 2 of you are new. You haven't been through this process. The other 3 have been through this. So this first part is going to be geared really to the 2 new board members, but everybody please chime in. You're in a transition period, and you're going to need to make some decisions. And one of the first decisions you have to make is, what does your new superintendent need to look like? And we'll be talking about that in a little while. But this is a pre-test. Those of you who've seen this before know the answer, but those are 8 things that may be necessary for a new superintendent to bring in their pocket. What items are absolutely necessary by law? Do you know?
The certificate.
The certificate, okay. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. What else may be necessary by law? Up there.
They definitely have a valid fingerprint clearance card.
Okay.
Pretty much everything up there is almost a necessity of what you need to have.
What do you think?
I would tend to agree, but by law, I don't know about that part, but
Yeah.
by, yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Well, here's the answer. It's real simple. The law changed about 5 years ago. You don't even need a certificate now to be a superintendent, okay? All you have to have out of that whole list of things I showed you by Arizona Revised Statute 15503, the only thing you have to have is a fingerprint card that's valid and up to date. What does the law say? The law says that the board of each district will make a determination what the requirements are going to be for their superintendent. And that's based upon the fact that legislators in their conversations said, if you get a person out there that can run a company, they certainly can run a school district. That was the logic behind it. Right or wrong, that was the logic behind it. So one of the responsibilities you have, and something we'll talk about in a later agenda item, is what do you want this interim to look like? Because you have to make that decision before we can move into actually posting the position. Oh, what else do we need to think about? Some of the questions that come up, this list, where do we start? Where do we end? What's the board's responsibility? What would ASBA's responsibility? What should our timeline be? Why is it a formal process? Is there a cost? Well, the answer lies in being ready, starting with bullet 1. Are you ready? No, you're not. You're not ready. My job to get you ready. Are you on the same page? No. No. I could ask Kelly one question. I could turn around and ask Chuck a question, and very valid answers, but they're different. So we have to get you ready. What direction is best for the district? We'll decide that as we move forward. We know where we're going to start. We know where we're going to end. How are we going to get there? You're going to tell me, and I'll give you options and opportunities to discuss, and we'll get there together. Who's out there to help you? Well, that'll be a search agent like ASBA, and that would be our job. Again, as I said earlier, you make the decisions. We do all the background work to get you to a point where you're ready to make decisions. Do we have a correct path? Yeah, we do. but it changes. We can start off in one direction and we have to be understanding of the process. It may move. The timeline may move. The process may move because as you begin to get into it, you may say, it sounded like a good idea, but let's change it. What else can we do? Where do we find the best person? Well, we advertise and try to get as many people to apply as possible. Now, first question that's going to come up for that is it the same for a regular superintendent as an interim? Generally, the answer is no. Generally, you're going to get more activity if it's a full-time job that looks like it could go for years and years as opposed to an interim. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get quality candidates. In fact, I'll tell you, I've already had some interest, even though we haven't posted it. I've had phone calls from people saying, when's that going to open? When do we make a final decision? Well, when you're ready. We'll have a timeline, but that timeline is only as good as where you're at as an individual and as a board. You'll make the decision when that occurs. What should the timeline be? I'm going to go over that. Usually a full process takes about 12 weeks. But I would say in conversation with your board president and also because where we're at this time of year, we might want to expedite that. 12 weeks is a long time. And I've got a plan to do that, but it's maybe too aggressive, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Why is it a formal process? Because you're bound by some legal matters, and you're also bound because you're an equal opportunity employer. So we have to be sure that we answer all the right questions, do all the right things. And again, that falls on me to give you direction on how that happens and to make sure that the little things behind the scenes work. For instance, when you interview people and you're doing it in an executive session, they have to receive notice, formal notice of that. That's on us to make sure those things occur. And is there a cost? Yeah, there is a cost to the search. How much is this going to cost this board? Depends on what you ask me to do. If we were doing a full comprehensive search for a new superintendent with all the bits and pieces that we normally use, and you say that's what we want, and we go forward. It's based on your school population, and you have a school population about 3,200, if I'm not mistaken, in that area. It costs you about $7,500 to $8,000. Okay. Now we don't have to spend that much on an interim unless you want to do everything. But I'll explain what some of those things are that I don't think you need to do as we move through this. So that's some of the questions that generally come up in this process. The scope, well, we need to talk about roles, responsibilities, timelines, all of these things we will need to talk about to get to the point where you're ready to hire somebody. And that, in short, takes us all the way through to item 11. I want to mention contract negotiations. We don't do that. That's up to you and your attorney to do that because that's a legal matter. Going backwards, item 9, community participation in a full search for a longtime superintendent. We expect that should occur. In this instance, it may not be the same because you're looking for an interim and you're trying to move possibly a little quicker. We'll talk to you about salary and benefits. We'll talk about all of these items as we move through. If you have any questions as I move fast through this, stop me and ask me.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I heard you right, and you said that the cost is dependent on the size of the district,
Yeah,
right?
that's our formula.
Gotcha. I'm just curious why. What makes this maybe a silly question, but why is finding a superintendent for a bigger district more difficult than finding one for a smaller district?
In a bigger district, if we're working with a district of 38,000, there's just a lot more moving parts. We do basically the same thing, but generally speaking, when you're working with a district that large, there's other caveats to it. Plus, it's our pricing structure, just as it is with you belong to ASBA. Smaller districts have a different pricing structure than larger districts. So it follows just the business model that we've had for years. You could, if you wanted to put a soapbox down and argue either way, you could. Why isn't it the same for everybody, or why is it different if you've got 30,000 students opposed to 3,000 students? Any other questions on that? Okay, roles and responsibilities. We're going to go over that a little bit more in another agenda item, but I'll bring it up now that you have received this document in your electronic file. This is the agreement, and then the roles and responsibilities are basically there in that also. But ASBA, we have our role is to counsel you through this whole process. We need to talk about the timeline. We need to talk about the different pieces of the puzzle and how they're going to fit. And it's my responsibility to ensure that you are on the same page. If I find that I'm working with you and Chuck's got one idea and Kelly's got another idea, we need to talk about that. We need to make sure that we are in the same place and that you're in the same place. And that's my responsibility. We advertise the vacancy, we collect all the applications. We put them all together in files, we bring them to you. One of the things we do that some agents don't do is we bring you every file, whether there's a valid application or not. And by valid, I mean maybe they don't meet the qualifications. If you say they have to have a superintendent certificate and somebody puts in a file that doesn't have one, I'm still going to bring you the file because they're yours, not ours. And I want you to see what you have. Now, I may bring you 2 stacks, an A stack and a B stack. These people fulfill all the obligations of your posting. These people don't, and here's why. But you see everything. We don't keep anything back. We will arrange all the interviews. We'll arrange all of the background checks. We'll arrange all of the paperwork that has to occur, the timing of the meetings, the agendas, and such. That all be from your local newspaper, for instance. And that's on us. That doesn't mean you won't get asked a question. You could be in the market, you could be sitting at home and the phone rings, whatever the case may be. It could be at a board meeting. We don't want to put you in a position though where you have to defend yourself later on. So the guidance there is be good listeners, but don't back yourself into a corner. Real easy for somebody in the market, they see Jack in the market and you know we're buying groceries or something and somebody says, hey, come on now, tell me, what are you really gonna do here? You know, we know who you're interviewing, who are you gonna push? That's not a good place for a board member to go. So be a good listener, but make sure you don't commit yourself to something. Because once you back yourself into a corner, you can't get out. So any inquiries should come to me. I'll take them and I'll work with, whether it's a community member or it's a member of the media, let me do that. It's just a safer place for you to be. Protecting confidentiality, you have to remember that these folks are applying for a position with you and they're putting their livelihood on the line and their family on the line to, you know, be able to come to you and do the job you want. So there's a degree of confidentiality that we must maintain. And that applies to the executive session. You've all been in an executive session. You know what is stated at the beginning, that everything said is confidential and nothing leaves the room. That's going to be true of a lot of what we do, because some of what we do, obviously, is going to be an executive session. So those are ASBA's basic roles and responsibilities. What about the board? Well, you need to provide me with all the information I asked for. You need to show up at meetings. You need to be straightforward and honest with each other. You need to protect the confidentiality, just like I do. You need to make the heavy decisions. This is not an easy process. ASBA believes that this is probably the most important thing as a board you will do. Pick a leader. Now, you're looking at maybe a year. It's an interim position, but sometimes interims, they get in position and you're thinking, wow, this person's really good. And maybe the interim is the one that you keep full time. You don't know that at this point, but until you have somebody in the saddle working with you, you may find, hey, let's talk about this more long term. So those types of decisions all come down to you. And then working with your attorney is obviously something you have to do that we're not part of. We don't give legal advice. We don't get involved in contracts. And then your district has to fulfill its I-9 obligation. That's hiring practice. That's something your district HR people know quite well, and they take care of that for you. What's it take? Well, an interim search can take 2 to 4 weeks if we move quickly. Now, that's very quickly. And I've set up a timeline in the search agreement that moves just about that quick. The problem with moving too quickly is you can make a mistake. and you can start focusing on time rather than substance. And what you want to do is focus on substance. Are we bringing to the table the right people? And are you willing to move a timeline if you need to? You know, if we set up a timeline where you're going to have interviews on such and such a day, and you have those interviews, right person's not there. Well, let's back up. Give you an example. I worked with a district about 4 years ago where they had a lot of applicants. They had over 20 applicants, close to 25. They looked at everybody and they decided they were going to interview this set of about 5. They interviewed them. They said, okay, well, we want to bring back 2 of them for a final interview. In the end, they said, you know, we're just not feeling good about this. What do we do? So, you know, my suggestion was we went back out. We advertised again. We got more applicants in that hadn't applied the first time. They interviewed again and they said, okay, now we're happy. And they moved on. I'm not saying that's going to happen. It doesn't happen very often. So I don't know if it'll happen in your situation, but you just need to be advised of that. We can go just as much as advertising, and that's all we do. Talking about cost, if you say, well, we can do all these other things ourselves, all we want you to do is advertise. Okay, and that doesn't cost you a thing. You remember, we put it on our website that you're looking for somebody, and all the apps come to you and you do everything else. We can also create a brochure, create applications, get the applications, and then turn them over to you, and you take it from there. And then we can do a full search. Or we can modify that down because this is an interim position, and we can kind of get halfway in between where we're doing the majority of the work, but we're cutting some corners. Not that it's going to affect you. You can still see the same people. You still interview the same people. But we can cut some corners, spend less money, your money, and less time. But as I should mention earlier, a full search, if that's what you wanted to do for an interim, that'd be 12 to 14 weeks. That puts you pretty close to the end of the year. That's pushing the envelope if you want to get somebody in place to make a transition. The position profile, a lot of different things. These are just some examples. Current earners and a certificate in place. Most districts do want that. Maybe certification, or maybe public school experience as a superintendent. Definitely most districts want to know if the person's been in the classroom, had an administrative job in the past with a public school, because then they know the turf better. It also helps staff, because if you have a superintendent who comes in and hasn't had classroom experience, the teachers always, quite honestly, and rightfully so, kind of wonder, do they really know what I'm going through on a daily basis in this classroom? Preferred some things, you know, a history of community involvement, good communication skills, understanding public school budget and finance. Those are all important pieces. So all of this, not saying this is your list, I'm saying these are the types of things that we talk about when we create that list. And then how much you're going to pay them. In the last advertisement you did, the board set a schedule of $120,000 to $135,000. You've got 3,000 students. You're not small. The average size district in the state is smaller than you are, but you're not large. We do a salary survey every year and talk to the districts and get an idea of what everybody is paying. That's not a bad range. Should you pay less for an interim? Probably not, because you're going to ask them to do the same job. You expect the same thing to occur. I use this example, I don't know if you remember it, but with Jack at one point, where I said, I used the term dry dock. You know, when you put a boat in dry dock, what's it going to do? It's just going to sit there and wait for something, right? Generally repair. Is that where you really want to go? Or do you want this organization to continue to move forward? And if you do, then you need somebody that can do that, and you need to pay them, in my opinion, the same that you would pay a superintendent if you're looking for somebody to stay full-time. But that's your decision. That's your decision. And I'm not sure at this point where your current superintendent is. I'm not saying because he's been here 3 years. I'm not saying that you bring a person in at that level, but you have to come up with a range that is comparable, that fits the job, fits the district, fits the budget, and isn't something that the community is gonna say, excuse me, you're gonna pay this new one $200,000 because you really like him. That's not gonna work in your community, so it has to be balanced.
Part of the, just Steve's question, part of that is a base range, and then you start, once the negotiations begin, then you start adding the other add-ons that kind of fill out the balance of the contract once you actually get down to an actual person.
Exactly.
You don't start at the high range and then that's a base range.
Yeah.
Then we negotiate everything past that point.
You know, you look at their qualifications as they walk through the door. Maybe you set a range that's about $15,000 apart, like you did here, 120, 135. And you look at the person and say, oh, the person we chose has got 7 years worth of superintendent's experience. You're probably not gonna start them at the very bottom. And then in the negotiation part too, where are you gonna be with benefits? Well, your general benefits are probably gonna apply. If you have a superintendent that's been in the district a while, you may be also talking about some type of a 401k plan, that sort of thing. You generally don't do that with an interim because it's considered a short time period, and that's not going to play into it. But and things like a car allowance, you may give your current superintendent a car allowance. Is that something you need to do with an interim? You'll need to work that out with the interim that you choose and your attorney. But I will say, don't lose your best candidate for a couple of $1,000 bucks. You know, if you're $5,000 apart, I mean, you know, find a way to make an adjustment. If you're $40,000 apart, you probably aren't in a conversation, you know. But don't lose your best candidate for a few $1,000s. And I already did that. So advertising and recruiting, we'll do all that for you. That's all part of the process, unless you choose for us not to do that. And we advertise nationwide unless you tell us not to. Probably for an interim, you're going to get very little action nationwide. But it doesn't cost any more or take any more effort on our part other than push a few buttons to put it out nationwide. And if we do, what that amounts to is it goes to over 60 universities across the country. It also goes to our sister organizations, anywhere from Oregon and Washington to Kentucky and the East Coast, because we have school board associations in virtually every state. So it goes nationwide, and we do get a lot of activity, and I'm still getting activity now from other states. I got one in today from Kansas, Alaska, most recent also. So other states are still in the same position that we are, and that's generally true through the process. Screening, I mentioned to you, I'll bring you all the applicants. You get 5 applicants, I'll bring you 5 files. You get 15 applicants, I bring you 15 files. I will do background on each one of them, so I can come to you and say, I think this is your A stack and here's why. And I'll review with you each person. And then you have a chance to look at the file, read the file, try to understand what is important to you that you see in the file. And you can look at the B stack, you can look at all of them, or you can say, okay, they don't qualify because they don't have a certificate. Is there a reason to look for them? Probably not, or look at them, probably not. That doesn't mean they're not a good applicant. People try to get these jobs, and maybe, an effort that they know may be a little bit questionable because they don't have all the requirements, but they still need to have the practice, and maybe it's a situation that changes where they're the right person for you. So that usually takes 3 to 6 hours when we have 20, 25 files to go through. I don't think it's going to take that long. I don't think we're going to have 20 to 25 files for this interim position. Interview preparation, my job to get you ready for interviews. We would talk along the way about what's an interview going to look like, what are the questions you're going to ask, and what are you trying to achieve when you ask a particular question. So that's a part of the process that I'll work with you on. The interviews themselves, an executive session, again, the process may be different. The standard interview process, as you know, person sits there, you ask them 10, 12 questions, they answer, you say thank you. But there's other things you can do. I do role plays with people so you see how they react in a more stressful situation. We have open forums where it's a round table and you're just more of a conversation. We ask them at times to present a PowerPoint where you've asked them a question, please address this and tell us what you think about this issue. Might be have to do with budget, it might have to do with student learning, it might have to do with community involvement, and you ask them to make a short, 10-minute presentation. They do that. You ask them questions about it, and that's part of the interview. So it's not just questions and answers. It can be a variety of things. And when we get to that point, I'll talk to you in more depth about that, and you'll give direction. Usually we're looking at 2 interviews. In this situation, I think I would set up the agenda I think I would say we should have 2 interviews on the schedule. Because the schedule is flexible, I think we should set up the first interview where you could make a decision on that first interview. Because sometimes when you do that, it's pretty evident that somebody really is at the top of their game compared to everybody else. And we can do that the way we set up the agenda. We can either set it up to go into a second interview or set it up to do 1 interview and a decision at that point. Community participation, again, it's up to you, but it's going to be pretty hard right now to get people together in a community setting. What that normally looks like is getting an auditorium or a gymnasium, open the doors and say, come on in, and we'll ask questions of these folks that are finalists, and you can sit there and listen. But I don't know what your community is ready for when it comes to the COVID and when it comes to getting a big group of people together. I was working with a district recently where the city said, no, you're not going to do that. We're not going to give you permission to do that. Where you're at here, I don't know how that would work for you. But, and with an interim, the other part of this is it necessary for you? Well, you have to make that decision. So community involvement, we also have an e-survey that we put out. We did that last time. I don't think, because it's been such a short period of time, that it's changed. The response we got, those of you who were here last time we did this, you remember we had about a 40-page document that outlined what people thought. The questions are, what do you think the person needs in terms of leadership skills? What do you think the person needs in terms of management skills? What should they know about budget and finance? What should they know about education? What are the positives in the district right now? What are the challenges in the district right now? And I think last time we did this, you wound up with about a 40-page document that outlined that. We can do that. It takes extra time. It's going to cost you a bit more money, but it may be something you feel necessary to have at least input in that sense from your community. Getting people together in a community meeting, community forum, that might be something you need to think about a little stronger, because it may not be something you want to do because of the COVID. Decision-making, all of you, you make the decision when you're ready to move on. And I mention all the time that, if we're starting to go too fast, you need to say, excuse me, we're going too fast. Slow us down. We got to go back. We got to take a different approach. And we will customize for that. Negotiations, I've already mentioned that. That has to do with your attorney. Transition plan, we offer, if you want, again, you don't have to do it with an interim, but it may be important for you. We offer a transition plan where one of our trainers comes out after you've hired somebody, sits with you and then interim superintendent, talks about roles, responsibilities, talks about communication, talks about things that are going to help make that transition easier. Now, what that amounts to is 1 meeting. That would be built into the cost of the program if that's what you want to do. And you can also have it come out multiple times during the year for different fees for what they do if you want them part of that process. And you don't have to have it all. But it is something that we offer. We generally say if it's going to be a full-time superintendent, please do it, because we want to get them off a good setting. In an interim situation, since this is a full year that you're looking at, I would say it's a good idea. that you do that, but again, it's your choice. So with that, that's the basic, this a little. Slide 20, there you go. That's the basics. That gives you the overall view of what a search is going to look like. It's not always the easiest thing to do because there is some stress, and you get stressed from each other, you get stressed because of the situation, and you get stressed because you've got community and staff looking at you going, make the right decision, guys. And there may be somebody emerge that folks here know that big push, and you looking at somebody else. So those are all stressors that can occur. Questions? Any other direction you need?
I think you're leading us in a great path here. So early on, when we were communicating email, you mentioned that the interim search you thought was going to be somewhere around $3,000. Is that for a whole search, or is that
If we don't
basically
do
the
the-
modified search we were talking about?
Right, but if we don't do the community surveys, if we don't have the community meetings and that sort of thing, if we just stick to, we're gonna advertise, we're going to utilize pretty much what we did here, update, abbreviate a little bit, and this is the last advertisement 3 years ago. If we're gonna do that, and then we're gonna set up where we collect the files, and I bring them to you, and we screen them together, and then we have an interview, and maybe go into a second interview, yeah. $3,000 plus expenses, and expenses here means my travel. There's no overnight time, there's no per diem, because you're so close. So $3,000 plus the travel time mileage, and we use the federal mileage, which is 0.575 per mile. Unfortunately, I live on the complete other end of the world from you. So I'm coming from North Peoria. So it's a little bit of a distance.
Oh, my God.
But,
Yeah,
yeah,
we see on that too.
but,
Yeah, you swing around them.
The worst part about it is between Queen Creek and Casa Grande, so.
Well, if you're coming from Peoria to 202, I mean, the swing through the reservation back over there, Levine, and come back,
Yeah.
it's so much better.
so 3,000, to do that basic model, $3,000 plus mileage is gonna cover the cost. You wanna do more community things, you wanna have meet the public night, you wanna have the e-survey, you wanna have a meeting with other administrators, staff meetings with the candidates, with the finalists. You wanna do those things, the price builds up. We do everything to the nth degree that you saw here, and we're in that $7,500, $8,000 range.
I guess the question is, if we're going for an interim, then do you want to do this for practice this time and then spend all the money this time and then do it again here back in November, December?
No, say that one again for me.
I said, should we be doing this essentially as an interim? Do we want to spend all that money on this time when we're, more than likely, unless you just happen to dumb luck find the right person that can continue, you're going to be doing this again back in November, December this coming year for a full-on search where you would actually be anticipating spending that amount of money.
Then you'd start, yeah, you would anticipate then, and the right time to start on a process like this is in the fall. Start talking about it with a search agent, whether it's us or another one, in October, November. Get all your ducks in a row in December. Either get it out in the street in late December or early January. Finish it up by March 15th or sooner, and move forward. But yeah, at that point. Now, last time what this board did is that you actually put out the district an RFQ, request for quotes. And there were, I think, two of us, ASBA and another group that came and responded to that. So that's another option for you too. If you want to, try to get the price point where you want it, you can also go out for an RFQ at that point.
If I recall, the cost on the other company was about 3 times what we were gonna Hey, you got it.
It was more.
Yeah.
Well,
You may not want to say that too loud while he's in the room.
we're not for profit. We're getting a little off subject right now, so if we can stick with the transitions, are there any other questions with transitions and kind of what you're looking forward to?
No, I think realistically, since we're right now at April 8th as of today, school finishes on May 20-something or other. And the timeline you're looking about, I mean, it is here and now. So the process of moving forward and getting, at least stuff on the street, getting advertisement out there so you can at least get some kind of people before folks start making decisions on their summer vacation plans. And tie somebody, get somebody online and, get Steve having access to transitioning them before he leaves on June 30th is kind of, I think is where the board is kind of at this point.
As you think through what you're going to have us do and how it's going to look, keep that in mind. If there are no other questions, Mr. President, we can move to the next agenda item if you're ready.
It is your show, please.
The next agenda item is a decision item. And it clearly simply states the governing board may discuss and may consider approval of ASBA as a district search agent for its search for an interim superintendent. So it's a simple question. Do you want to move forward with this? Yes or no? And it's your discussion.
I think you've heard Steve's presentation this evening and kind of have a common understanding. So as the rest of the board, do you have a feeling of, would you like prefer to go forward with ASBA in this? And if so, we need a motion to move forward with that. That's the plan.
I'm the only one here that most recently went through one of these things. And like I said, I remember we went out for bid with an RFI for 2 people. And we eventually chose ASBA and the whole process, it was about 12 weeks, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. It was a very good, streamlined, detailed process working with you guys. I felt like you guys gave us everything we needed and lined up all of our candidates, and you did a very good job. All your reports, you did a very good job of vetting each candidate and giving the information that we were looking for. And we were able to, you were able to sit down with us and sort through each one of those. And I know we had a B pile. We wasn't sure about it. We'd set one aside and we'd come back to it. And I was very satisfied with how you guys ran the program. I wouldn't flinch about going forward with you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I personally have gone through 2 with ASBA back in 1999 and then 2000, back in late 2010, almost 2009, did another one with ASBA, and both times they were positive. And you definitely get a pile of files that you go through, and A and B files, and we need to kind of spend a day going through it. But I would follow Chuck's recommendation that you guys are very professional and present the best, and have access to a wealth of people, locally, and have access to, who is out there might be. So that would be, but if anybody else, please.
I make a motion that we move forward with ASBA on this search agreement.
Second.
A motion by Chuck and a second by Kelly. Mary, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Mr. Hennis,
Yes.
Ms. Harrington,
Yes.
and Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
All right. Just have a quick question. You bet.
Can you recall how many candidates we had before Steve, Dr. Beebe was picked as superintendent for our school here district? How many did you have last time?
I don't recall. I think it was in the range of 20, but I'd have to go back and look at our file.
I have.
You know?
Yeah, you're probably about right. It's about 20.
Okay. Do I expect that many for an interim? No, not at this time of the year. Okay, next item, sir.
You're on, Ben.
The next item, since, and thank you very much for vote of confidence, having us work as your search agent. Everything comes, well, obviously we're in agreement. We gotta do the legal part next. So, this is our standard agreement. The first 5 pages are virtually the same thing, that the board looked at last time. What it amounts to is it's the legalese part of it. Our attorney sat down several years ago, wrote it, has tweaked it a little bit. Most of the attorneys that work with districts in the state have seen it because we work with most of the district's attorneys, school district's attorneys in the state. What it would amount to is, as it says there, the agreement would commence tomorrow by date, if you agreed to it tonight. It basically would end on June 30th. That doesn't mean we're not finished well before that, but we either finish early or it finishes then. If we're not done at that point, we can write an amendment or an addendum, pardon me, and we can extend it. I would not think we would do that. Some of the authority. We have very limited authority. We are not connected to the district other than we're a vendor at this point. We have no authority on behalf of the district other than what you tell me to do. And that's important. You're the board, you make all the decisions. I'll make, when it comes to decisions about whether to capitalize the T or not capitalize the T or dot the I or not dot the I, okay, I'll do that. I'll be talking to those people who call me. I will, in regards to the position, I will go out and I will contact people that I think would be good for the position. So I will do all of those things. But decision-wise, because you signed this doesn't mean you can't get out of it. Let's say you sign it today and you sign it today and a week from now you say, you mean to say, you know, confidentiality. If I find that you're not following state guidelines related to open law, then I can do the same thing. I can say, thank you, but we're gonna walk away. And we agreed to that, and you owe us what you owe us at that point. If it's 5 days from now, you don't owe us a thing. Depending on how much we've done for you at the point. Whether you tell us goodbye or we say goodbye. Has that ever happened? No. But it's legalese and it's in the document that you have that right to say, it's not gonna work. Also, there's a non-discrimination clause in here. You're an equal opportunity employer. This is, you have to follow the federal guidelines related to non-discrimination. Other than that, those are the high points. Other than that, it's the attorney language that binds us in a work agreement for this process. The real crux of it begins with the scope of work, and that is back in Exhibit A on page 6. If you would go there, please. Everybody have that up? Okay. Now this is pretty much what we start with everybody. So because this is an interim search, we're gonna need to go through these things one at a time. Apologize for the drudgery, but we need to make sure we're on the same page with it. We would provide consulting services. We would create a mutually agreed upon timeline, okay? We would complete a profile for screening. Now, that profile, to keep the cost down to $3,000 means you just tell me to take this, revamp it a little, and use it for your search. And I would tell you that what I would do with this is, I think your opening statement is fine. We changed a couple of dates in it possibly. Maybe the number of students in a couple of places. I get that from administration. I don't believe you've changed your vision statement, have you? You have?
Mission and vision.
No, mission and vision have nothing.
Vision, we changed it a little bit. We added a
Career.
couple words, yeah.
And I would change that and update it, and I get that offline, I assume. Some of the things that you put on the bottom of the page there, that the governing board is proud of those things. Is there anything on those items that you're still not proud of? Are all those things important to you? Is there anything on there that's not current? For instance, your bioscience STEM pathway, your engineering program, are all those things still in place?
If not better, after 3 years.
If not better, okay?
Yes, is there anything else that would be coming from a superintendent, interviewing type person, maybe you,
Well, the priorities, the district priorities, we now have our new priorities, we would want to update those. And the mission statement, we just added educational and career opportunities for all students. Looking at some of the stellar programs, I think those programs are all still, but I think at this time, we definitely would want to add, our automation robotics, and, because those are now new, and that's going to drop here. So.
is that what is First Robotics? Is that what that?
First Robotics.
Or is that?
That's John Morris does it. It's a group of students who go out and they actually compete. They build robots, right? Go through all the robotic high school competitions. Obviously, we haven't done much with that this year because of COVID, but that's what they generally do. But yeah, so there's a couple of things that I could certainly provide that we upgraded that definitely improves the district profile.
All right, with that, if the administration would simply send me those things tomorrow, then I can incorporate those in this document and update that first page. The second page, Castle Community, is there anything in that has changed? I wouldn't
That
think.
last paragraph, you have about 3/4 of it you need to cross out.
There's two of them,
Phoenix
huh?
Park, Dreamport Village needs to come on.
But Tessa's still coming, right?
Tessa is sort of out there.
Yeah, Lucid Motors is here.
Let me ask you a question, if is that last paragraph, because this is an interim, is that last paragraph even necessary at this point?
No.
Probably not.
So we could use the first, the second, and actually that fourth last statement, and just skip the part in the middle, because this is an interim, and we'd still be in good shape with the document.
I actually think you could even omit that last sentence. When you compare that last sentence to the first sentence of the second paragraph, it's a little redundant anyway.
Yeah, that's the same thing. The only thing you might do is that for that last sentence, you might, in the past year, Lucid Motors has opened a plant here. That might be something just to include in that last sentence and take out the rest of the 4 projects below there, et cetera. But that's kind of a shining part for Casa Grande right now, is Lucid Motors.
That's an easy do.
Yeah, so you'd have to take that last sentence out too, that says in the last 2 years, 4 major projects have announced.
Yeah,
Maybe you
that's what Taylor just,
No, I thought you were talking about
Oh,
the
yeah, that's
Catherine,
what I
the
was.
city is, I thought you were talking about
No, you're right.
with the tremendous potential and a vibrant future.
So,
So take the city, Casa Grande is a city with a tremendous potential, and that
Yeah,
redundant? What's that?
We can kill that because we've already established that it's a vibrant,
Yeah.
growing city. And it doesn't need to be,
Keep on saying it.
its potential doesn't also need to be tremendous. I feel like we have established that there. But then we also need to get rid of, in the last 2 years, 4 major projects have been announced.
And maybe you could put the part about, in the last year, Lucid has blah, blah,
Yes.
blah, blah.
And that's where I thought in the last year, you can include some kind of verbiage about Lucid, because that's kind of an interesting, especially for the tech side of things.
Okay. Those were another way I look at it, those were flowers that we really don't need at this point.
Yeah.
In the document. So we'll use the first paragraph as is. I'll adjust the second paragraph to take out the part about the 2 years. Take that out, and we'll just leave it at that.
That's
Is
great.
that fair enough?
Sure, that's perfect.
Now let's look at the position requirements. Remember, this goes back to 15503, Arizona revised statute. This is what you were looking for last time. The governing board seeks a highly energetic educational professional. I would say that's, a valid statement. Who's got a background in teaching, educational leadership, successful candidate will possess the skills necessary to continue the district's commitment to excellence. This goes back to my dry dock. You don't want to put the district in dry dock just because you have a interim.
Right.
I think that's still a valid statement. Requirements. Now, when you say these are requirements, this is an A-B stack sort of thing. The A stack, everybody in the A stack, if you keep these 4 points, would have a current Arizona certificate held at the time they apply. Sometimes we get somebody that applies and they say, well, I've applied for it, I should have it in 3 months. The pivotal word there is should. You hope to. So what the board chose last time was to say, no, they have to have it.
In our last search, I know there were 6 or 7 candidates in there that did not have a current certificate. They were applying for one. Some of them were in progress, and one or two didn't even have one at all. I mean, I think our scope was, I think we were gonna leave it open. I don't remember I don't know if we required them the certificate, but I know that the candidates that we got, there were several of them that didn't have a current one.
Last time you required it, you said, and that created the A-B stack. That doesn't mean that the B stack wasn't great people trying to get a job. It just means they didn't fulfill that one aspect of the requirement. So last time you said yes.
These are your templates right here from the previous.
This is it right
You
here.
posted the last time. These are exactly what was used the previous time.
But there were several, they didn't have a certificate.
So the question becomes, is that still something you want, a certificate in hand when they apply?
I guess one of the questions that potentially is, and I know that you can still have an A and a B stack, and you could still look at we could still look if there was somebody who had met all the other attributes but didn't have their superintendent certificate and fell into the B stack, you could still have to, you could still review them and go through them. It's just they wouldn't reach that next level. Is that?
You can, but you've got a fair labor practice possible problem there. Because if you say you have to have it, and then you hire somebody that doesn't have it, and other people had it, that could come back to bite you. How do you get around that? You put preferred. You'll notice down at the bottom it says preferred attributes in the second area.
Yeah, and I think that's cleaner, just so that, because there might be some folks out there that are interested or looking at, potentially locally that might be interested in applying for it.
Especially
Maybe, Dr. Beebe, if you could give us an idea of to what extent did your superintendent certificate prepare you for this job? And I ask that with the confession that when I reflect on my own teaching practice, I'm not sure that my teaching certificate credentialing experience was the thing that made me a good teacher.
No, it's just that to obtain the certificate, you had to have sat for the exam to demonstrate competency, in the position. But remember too, that you don't have to have your doctoral degree to get a superintendent certificate. You could have a master's degree and get a superintendent certificate. So you don't have a doctoral degree. So that's, I think some districts, they want a doctorate, other districts don't care. But a lot of districts want to see the superintendent certificate just because, but does it truly, prepare for the job other than you had to sit for an exam? And I think the internship that I did was more preparation than anything, so.
When you look at all of these things, I can open this up to a real, maybe simple discussion. I think I used this chuckle, remember, at the last time we got together. You want to create, this is kind of like a funnel. Did I use that example with you last time? Kind of like a funnel. The wider you keep the top of that funnel, the more applicants initially are qualified.
Right.
As you work down through the process, that funnel squeezes, and at the end, the right person pops out. So the easiest way to do this, if you wanted to, and it doesn't negatively affect you, it maybe positively affects you, is just to say everything's a preferred attribute. So when it says requirements, instead of saying that, we just take that out, we move preferred attributes to the top. Everything becomes preferred. You make the decision who you're going to interview when you see their file. What do you think?
I think that makes the most sense that there is, and it takes out any kind of legal questions as far as once you make a choice, the person that they.
You're still looking for the best candidate, you still have to understand what preferred means, but you're weighing them, you know, this person doesn't have a certificate, this person does, this person's got 30 years' experience in the district office as an assistant superintendent or maybe a director, as opposed to this person's a principal. Good experience as a principal, has a certificate, this person's actually lived the district office life. It's preferred, you need to weigh the scale. Okay, that's an easy,
Yeah, that's a great fix.
Yeah.
we just make everything preferred, okay? And then, on to the next page. We can put budget and finance information in, and I can get an update from the district on that. They can send me the same information. I can get the governing board dates from the district office. I can plug those in, the new board members. The salary and terms of contract. The only thing you have to tell me on this one is what's your range gonna be? What do you think?
Like, Steve, I guess I'd ask you that same question. Since you guys do the annual survey, et cetera, is an opening position for an interim, is this and being more cash grant, is that just the negotiated starting point of the salary? Is that a good range to start with, or is?
It's a decent range to start with for a district your size. I am seeing districts your size will go higher now. I've seen districts your size go up over 150. That's a pretty good jump for you. And not everybody's doing that. And you're not looking for a long-term superintendent, which right now you're looking for an interim, but you're still looking for the best person you can get. Do you know where you're at right now with your current superintendent?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't say that you match it, but you need to be somewhere in a realm where it's not lowballing somebody. You know, if your current superintendent, I'm not saying he is or isn't, if your current superintendent is $160,000 and you say this position is not worth more than 120, that's a message. And I will tell you that the superintendents know where everybody's at. So it's not worth a few $1,000s to lowball. 120 to 135 is where you were last time. I think it's fine for this time, but you could also take it up to 140, and maybe if you got the right candidate, you'd go that high, maybe not. But you wouldn't go over or you wouldn't go under. That's, when you set the range, that's where you stick. 120 is beginning to be a little bit low for a union high school district, so maybe you consider going 125, 140.
Well, we got 3 years between this one being on the streets, et cetera, so cost of inflation over a handful of years, so you could, coming up to 125 or 140 is a decent range.
I think it's a decent range for you, and it gives you room to play. And if you have somebody that applies, that's got 7 or 8 years as a superintendent, and they've got a great track record, you're gonna be looking at the upper range. Because somebody that's coming out of a district office or maybe a principalship, but they have everything else in play, you're probably looking to start them closer to the bottom range. But you don't go outside the range.
No, but then you,
Once you set it, you stick with it.
but then you go, once you start the negotiation, and you start about all the other filler stuff that goes, that brings them up into a range where the superintendent has a smile on their face, correct?
Who's paying for insurance? That's it, that's always a biggie. Are you paying for family insurance or you're not? But then again, you know, with an interim, do you really want to load up a contract with all those little caveats right up front? That's a choice you'll have to make and have a discussion with your attorney on that. Our recommendation would be keep it simple, but be nice, and you know, you want to reward the person who's coming in to take the responsibility, and you don't want to dry dock the district. You want somebody to take it where it's at and move it forward so it's in a better place next year at this time than it is today.
Right.
The responsibility is still there. Okay, so I'm hearing maybe take both ends up, 5,000, maybe 125, 140.
Everybody got a feeling about that, 125, 140?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, especially like you said.
And I'll ask-
3 years. So.
I'm sorry.
I was just saying, just because it's been 3 years since this has been out there. So.
And usually these go up, we see about 2% a year. When we look at year to year, we see across the board about a 2% increase in most areas. Once in a while, we see a little decline, but it's usually because we measure these things by size of district, location of district, and type of district. JTED, Unified Union, and Elementary. And if you've had a couple of people that have been in a position in a particular district for 20 years, which there's few superintendents, but there are, they're at the top of the game. They leave, it can affect the numbers, and it can go down, but usually it's about a 2%. And I'll ask Dr. Beebe, he's connected with the superintendents, he's part of the superintendent's ASA. 125 to 140, does that seem to fall in your range of what you would think?
Oh, no. I think that's very reasonable. I think you'll attract somebody. I mean, you remember 2 or 3 years ago when I got here, we had the learning center here with all these kids, and now they're not here. You have 2 schools. Somebody's gonna be taking on AOI, but we already have the systems in place to manage that. And I can also tell you too, if you look at my contract, there's things on there that didn't exist when I was first hired, and I can tell you what those things are that have been added since I've been here when we renegotiated. So there may be some things that you don't want to add, offer an interim which saves additional money. Okay.
Now, the next thing you'll see, there's a timeline. Those are the timelines we used last time. That was for the full search, and it was 12 weeks or so. Going back to the agreement, if you look at Part B on the agreement, I'm going to modify this before I send it back for a signature, because we need to make sure that it fits where you said we should be. The question becomes on the timeline, where do you want it? Do you want to move this as quick as possible? You want to take a little extra time? Is there a finished date that you'd like to say by a certain date you're done? What's your thought?
I think the priority is to get this interim person some time with Dr. Beebe, right? And so I think the question, maybe Dr. Beebe can help us here, how much time, I mean, the answer is a lot of time, but given the restraints that we have,
Yeah, I'm thinking
how much
December, something like that.
Right, I mean, how much time could you do what you need to do with this new person in?
Well, obviously, the more time you get, the better, because there's, that way you can give people history. You can not only introduce people to, get them familiar with people in the district, but get them familiar with people in the community. Some of the things that I've been involved with, just some of those things. So the more time I have, the better. At the same time, I know as these things, you guys don't want to move so fast that you just settle, because then you'll kick yourself if you just settle on somebody and don't get who you want. So, I'm committed to do whatever I can to help anybody
But
as much time as possible. And remember, I'm not leaving the state. I will always be available by phone should anybody have questions.
But I mean, just to press you, gun to your head, if you had to give some amount of time,
Well,
what do you think?
I think the reality came to me as I looked at the last week in June and the first week in July. At some point in time, I have to move. So I'm gonna have to be done working, and I'm gonna try to split it over both districts, where I start a little later there and I have to get out, because I'm gonna have to move, so I'm gonna have to get out. So that's gonna take some days. So, if we can, that third week, that third week in June through there, probably that next week, it's gonna start getting dicey on what I need to do just to get my wife and I moved before I have to start working again. And because the 4th of July week falls where it is, I'm gonna kind of split time across both districts to get out and move and do what I need to do. So.
Steve, I had one of the questions I'd ask you, kind of along the same line, is kind of have a feel for what the potential pool is out there. What would be, not a Speedy Gonzalez, go as fast as you can, but something that's as a qualified, gives us a chance to get some decent applications in here and get some folks in here. Are you looking a couple, 2-3 weeks or something like that, or to have everything done in a month at the latest?
That, mean from today,
Yeah, or starting tomorrow?
that's the push. And I said earlier, I kind of put that in as a parameter, but I think that's a pretty strong push. Because the other part of that is not just getting the right candidates, but your level of comfort that you have the right candidate. I think that in reality, the best scenario would be to focus on having a possible decision from you by either the middle, if not at least the last week in May. That gives you all of June to make a transition. I think if we go into June, we're getting too far, because we also have to remember that person has to transition out of where they're at
That's a very good point.
and transition into something new. So they've got two transitions to make, just like Dr. Beebe's making two transitions, and it's not easy. So I think that what we could do timeline-wise is I could go back and rebuild what I had started to, put down initially, and rebuild it into a timeline where we're looking at mid-May. And then if we get saddled with some questions we need to take a little further, we've got a couple extra weeks to play with before the beginning of June. Chuck?
The timeline that you've got on here for interviews, are we going to be able to have some input on those dates? Or?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Right now, what my objective would be at this point would be go back and start for the middle of May and work backwards. And I would put down dates to open the search and close the search. And then we need a week in between, and then I put to be determined for those other dates.
Right.
And then at a future board meeting, you're gonna need to have conversation until May. And I would give the administration some indication of my schedule. You'd have to say, okay, if we're closing here, here's 3 dates where we can screen, and here's 3 dates where we can interview, and we'll work that out over the next couple of weeks, if that works, if that's okay with you.
Can I interject on something? The week of the 17th, that's graduations and last days of school. I think you want to stay away from that.
We've either done before that or we skip that week.
Right, and the next week is the week after, is the week before Memorial Day, so there's no obligations, no school, no nothing that week, the week after.
Well, we'll skip graduation. That is a disaster.
Yeah.
That's a tough week.
We have 2 graduations on the 18th and the 20th, so.
Mary, I need to go back because I got off on so many different pieces of the puzzle there. We still are on the agenda having to do with the agreement.
Oh, okay, so we need to vote on that, right?
We are at a point where I think we need to vote on this.
Yeah,
And
that's
I will tell you what I've heard. What I've heard is that with the, we haven't had any questions about the boilerplate legal language. The scope of work, we kind of got off there. And I went through my duties. I didn't go through your duties yet, so we need to get back to that. We kind of got off on those other things based on my duties. But on your duties, we've got provide ASD with everything, be present at the meeting, protect confidentiality, provide any additional questions for the application that you might want to have. I don't think you need that in this instance. We have a very complete application. I think that what that does is if you wanted me to put something in there that was a burning question for you, let's say it had to do with a real issue that you're having right now, COVID. How are you going to, how would you suggest, if you are our interim superintendent, you're going to help the district transition back to full-time learning at school? And then they write 250 words to that. I can add a question, not necessarily that one, that's just an example, but I can add a question to the application if you have something that's a burning question. It may be something like, I don't know where you are with your bonding. I don't know where you are with if you talk about a capital override or an M&O override. If any of those things that you feel are really important right now to you, that you want to have some input so you can read what they have to say to help you make a decision, is this a person you're wanting to review? This would be the time to tell me that.
Yeah, I think, personally, I think everybody will come with an answer on COVID. I mean, because I just think it's too much of in your face. And part of every school is having to deal with it in some fashion, et cetera. And the district will be back, full this coming Monday with all the students in place. So I think we're kind of, along that one. Other questions? You know, I think right now at this point is probably getting somebody in there and, you know, starting the process and as opposed to having them write something out, at least getting some, once we get some interviewers in here, some people interview that we'll have a chance to kind of ask those questions and have a chance to, you know, kind of draw some of that out.
As a consultant, I agree with that. I don't think you need a question right now. I don't put a line through extra questions. Again, the application process is very thorough. You'll have several pages of documents to look through. You have to refer the communications to me, as it says in 5. Posting all searches, that's up to Mary, or all search-related board meetings, that's up to Mary to do, and she does that for you regularly, so that's nothing new. Adhere to the conditions of procurement. You're doing that. You're under $10,000. If this search was $10,000 or more, up to $100,000, you would have to get 3 quotes. But you're not faced with that. So you're adhering to it because you're underneath. So you've already done that. Determine extent of community involvement. You haven't done that yet. But maybe what we do is we get this kicked off and you bring that back when we get a little closer and we do the screening and we put on the agenda at that point, what do you want to do? You want to do the e-survey at that point. You want to do the community meeting at that point. I don't think, as I said earlier, I don't think the e-survey is going to change much from the last time. I think you could review it and probably see basically what they said at that point. It probably applies today. But I think that's something we could do at the screening meeting where we would talk about, do you want to try to get the community together in a community forum to hear from the public? I've done those recently. I've also done them in person. I've also done them online. It depends on where you're at and your comfort level if you want to bring people in. Work directly with the board's attorney in negotiations and determine the candidate that you're going to enter into agreement with. Conduct background checks and security as necessary. We will do background checks for you if you want us to. Now, your district already does background checks. Your HR people do that. If we do it, it's an extra $175 per person that we do it on. And we don't do it until we get to the people you're going to interview. If you get 10 applications, we're not going to spend $1,700. But if you narrow it down to 3 or 4, we can do it. It's $175 a piece, or you can do it and you can do it cheaper than we can. The board can tell me, maybe Dr. Beebe has an idea about what you currently do.
Well, right now, we background check everyone. So yes, we can vet those who are we can do background checks on those who are going to be interviewed.
When you get to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I will do a simple reference check on everybody that applies. I'll have that. When I say simple, as opposed to a background check. Background check goes through criminal activities, looks at the federal, state websites and figures out if anybody's got an issue. Okay, so I'm going to say that that the district will do that.
Right.
And then adhere to all conditions of the agency handbook on open meeting law. And that's one of my jobs, and I'm real stickler on that, on open meeting law, because I can get in a lot of trouble with the AG's office, and I don't want you to go there. So I watch very carefully. So with that, we've got the timeline we've talked about. We've got the responsibilities. We kind of blended that a little bit, but we'll get over to the advertising document again in a moment. But with that, what I heard here is that we're going to modify the roles and responsibilities slightly, not a lot, but we are going to take out the application question. We are going to accept the base language of the legal part, and I am going to work from a May, and as far as the timeline is concerned, I'm going to start from a May, mid-May date and work backwards, but I will not include the dates for screening or interviews. We'll do that later. And I'll work with Mary a little bit on that so that we have that in place. I'll also indicate that we're not doing the background checks. If what I said is appropriate and you believe it's in agreement with what you said, somebody can simply say so moved.
I think that's what, I think the only other thing we pointed out was we were gonna have, the salary range was gonna go from 125 to 140.
And the salary range is not part of this document.
That's on the other.
That's the next, I kind of bled over into that.
Yeah, you're going through there.
This is just the agreement.
And you're gonna give us a timeline, so we're approving this,
The agreement. for
the
their
agreement
services.
template as presented, and you're gonna bring,
You're
scope
agreeing on the template presented with the modifications
to
that
exhibit
we
D,
talked
the
about.
timeline. Okay?
Is it my understanding that we are gonna have the option at a later date to do the background checks with ASBA rather than the district? And the reason I bring that up, and I'm not trying to disparage our personnel here, but there's been some issues that have happened in the past where the background check didn't reveal certain things and the public actually brought these things to the forefront. And we had to have an embarrassing situation with the newspaper putting that out. So my question to you is, are we gonna have that option to be able to use ASBA to do the background checks?
If you so chose to decide tonight that you're going to have the district, which is kind of where the discussion was, do it. And that's where it stands unless you come back to the table and change that. We would agree to do it if you changed your mind on that. So it could be an option later if you decide to go with what was stated. Now, if you want to make a case now for the district not doing it and for us doing it,
May interject on that?
you can make that case now. So
We can definitely interject on that.
On that specific incident, this was a current employee, a long-term employee that had been here, and what happened is the fingerprint card, and it had just, I mean, it was within where we hadn't gotten notified yet from, because every time somebody's fingerprint card is revoked, then they notify the district, they notify everybody. So that happened, and he was a current employee, that wasn't a background check.
Let me stop you, because that's off topic of where we're at.
He was just asking, I think she had.
No, but I was trying to tell him
No, I
about the,
understand.
yeah.
I just want to make sure we stay
Yes,
on
we're-
topic of where we're
definitely,
at.
she's staying on top. I think the question that it was in relation to if we were to ask you, and she was explaining the reason why.
The reason why we didn't know that
So
information,
we haven't
so.
moved too far off that. The question the clarification from you is if the board were to ask at that point, it would be an additional cost of $175, and we would just need to visit with you about choosing at that point.
And that can be done at screening. If you decide that, or
At
you
this
can
point-
decide now that you just want us to do it now.
At this point, we still have time to make that decision.
We're not going to put anybody through a background check. No, we'll do,
You'll do your
I'll do the
screening.
reference check, but through a full background check until you decide that
Who we're
they're
gonna
going to be somebody you're going to interview.
Right. Everybody comfortable with that, Joe? You comfortable with that? Sure. Chuck? Okay, so we're back down to making a motion for the independent ASBA as the independent contractor for interim superintendent search.
I so motion.
May I just add one piece to that?
Sure.
And as it says there, and may consider providing authority to the board president to sign the agreement. So you're agreeing to you're making a motion for the agreement, and you need to state that the board president is going to have the authority to sign that agreement.
On behalf of us.
I so motion.
And that's Tim's motion.
There it is.
And is there a second?
I got a second.
Chuck, second. Mary, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Mr. Hennis?
Yes.
Ms. Harrington?
Yes.
And Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
I will have that agreement, to you no later than Monday. And if you would then have it signed and send it back to me, 2 copies, and I'll sign and send it back to the one, and you'll have original signatures. Mr. President, we're off to the next document, which is the search document, which quite honestly, I kind of got ahead of myself because of things in the agreement. We've gone through this based upon some of the things that we were talking about in the agreement and what we would do. I think I've got a direction from you in regards to these things. Again, the vision, mission, little tweaking there, but I can get that off the website. The accomplishments of the district, I'm going to get that from the administration because it's changed a little bit. I'm going to change the Crafts Grand Community statement by taking out the last sentence in the second paragraph, and the third and fourth paragraph are going to go away. Under position requirements, what I heard you say is we're going to make everything preferred. I can also get the information on budget and finance to send me that. Your CFO can do that. I will change the governing board's information, and we'll set a salary at 125 to 140. And our search timeline dates will change based upon the mid-May. I think that is what we had talked about. If that is effective for you, then this is agenda item D, which is the governing board will discuss, no, pardon me. C, the governing board will discuss and may consider approval of the proposed, no, I was right the first time. The governing board will discuss the components of the position advertising document and may consider approval and direct ASB to put that together. And
I just had a question, Steve. I'm assuming that you want the current budget information, budget and finance information.
current budget information needs to
That's
come.
actually on our profile.
It's on our profile, but I can make sure, I'll make sure Gina gets it.
If you can send that to me, I appreciate
That's
it.
what it's saying, so just tie everything.
We'll get it to you.
Okay, so the action item is, we discussed and considered, and we have the template corrected now at this point, so we need to adopt the template as presented to you.
If you're confident that I have all the right information, I can have the template and everything ready to go and start advertising next week. If you would like to see it again before I put it out, you can schedule a special meeting where I give it to you and you can look at it one more time to make sure I've got exactly what you want.
Is it a violation of anything to just have it privately sent out to us for our own? Because I'm not sure that we would need to meet back in person.
I don't think we need a
But it might
special
be
meeting.
nice.
Also, I think if you would send out a copy, honestly, I think if you would send out a copy, and if there are any concerns or questions, then the board members, I mean, if you would email back through Mary, and then we could.
That's
Right.
considered polling the board,
Okay,
and I can't do that. That'd be like, I'd say, you want me to do this? Do you want me? I go to each one of you. Now, what you could do if you wanted in this motion is you could say that once I have it, it'll go to a member of the board, maybe again, the board president, to agree to it on behalf of the board before I put it out on the street. You can do that also.
Yes, I feel more comfortable, at least to have one of us review it and make sure all the information is correct.
Yeah, I think that would be smart.
yeah, I think that's fine. I don't quite, I think reviewing your document to make sure that you've included everything is not necessarily polling, but I understand the legalese that you're talking about. If the board is comfortable with that, are they coming back to me? And then if I've got any questions, we'll schedule a meeting with you about it.
And I would get it to Mary by Monday. You could look at it. If you agree to it, I just need that. If you say there's things we need to change, then we'll change them at that point. And you would just need to incorporate that into the motion for this item.
Okay. Get a motion to that effect to approve the search agreement as presented by ASBA with the ability for me to review it before the actual meeting goes out and before the actual document goes out.
Jack,
Advertising.
this is the advertising document, not the search agreement.
Advertising. Oh, excuse me, I'm looking.
I got you confused. That's my fault.
So everything that where I said search should be switched with advertising
And then to send to you for review and approval
before it goes out and hits the street.
And Chuck has made the motion too.
Chuck made the motion. Is there a second? Joe, second?
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Mr. Hennis,
Yes.
Ms. Harrington,
Yes.
and Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Okay, we're down to the last item tonight, which is the future search meeting.
The next time we get together as a group is going to be for screening of candidates. At that time, you'll have an opportunity in executive session to go through each candidate's file, screen each candidate, talk about each candidate. And once you've done that, you can come out of executive session and the board can agree through a motion and a second and a vote to offer to have ASBA invite these 3, 4, 6 people in to interview. We will also at that point have an agenda item to talk about the interview process. We'll have an agenda item to talk about the questions you're going to ask. We're also going to have an agenda item to go back to and help me remember this one. The question of who's going to do the background checks.
Right.
Because that came up. We'll also have that in play also. And then we will talk also about the third one. The fourth one is the community. At that point, be ready to talk about whether you want to have a full-on community meeting for people to come in and meet your finalist or your candidate or not. And again, I think COVID drives part of that, but I have done some successfully recently in person. I've also done some online. Are they as good? No, but they do work. So, if you can do it in person and your community can accept that and you're comfortable with it, it's really more effective. But that's your call.
I have a quick question. Can you tell me one more time, how many applicants would you expect for this time of the year in an interim position? If you were to guesstimate.
If we hit a dozen, I think we're lucky. I don't know that we'll even hit a dozen. It's an interim search and it's this time of year. And I think that speaks to why you're not going out for a full search right now. Because a lot of the folks that were quality candidates have already got a spot. Because you're coming in a little late.
No, and I think that's kind of the question. Some of that he had mentioned before that he was hoping for somewhere at 7 to maybe 10. And then the question is that kind of dovetails since you're essentially doing an interim search. Do you do the whole full-blown community, et cetera, or do you, once you get down to it, is it an introduction to staff, et cetera, and stuff like that? So, I mean, that would be board decisions into the future.
Yeah, if this was October, we'd have a different conversation tonight. So that is not an item for anything more than just discussion. That's what we're going to do the next time we get together. I'll be in touch with your board president. I'll be in touch with the administration to get the information I need. And I'll try to have this on the street as soon as within 24 hours of your approval.
That sounds great.
I'm just wondering too, to that end, even if it's 7, 8 people, is it possible for us to have access to their application materials prior to the meeting, just to look at and, so we maybe come to the meeting with ideas?
It's possible. We have issues of confidentiality there though. Here's what happens.
What if it's in our system here where we put documents? I mean, we put documents here all the time.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead and finish what you were saying. I was just saying we could be in our board docs program where we put documents all the time anyway, and only we have.
He's talking about putting it in executive content.
Here's what constitutes a public document. As soon as I hand you that document, it's public.
That's public.
We've just lost confidentiality. So if I deliver those files to the district a week or 2 ahead of time, so you can come in and look at them, and anybody can request them, and you're gonna have to give them up. And that's a confidentiality issue, and we don't wanna go there. Would it be convenient? Absolutely. Has it occurred? Yes. Is it advisable? No. And that's because of the confidentiality, because again, I hand you a document You have to catalog it, you have a policy that establishes how you're gonna catalog it, how you're gonna keep it, your rules by the Arizona Library of Archives, how long you have to keep it. And anybody can come in and request it, whether they're a stakeholder in this district or not.
And don't you normally do a review of those in executive session?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's.
That's how we can protect it.
And that's how you protect it. Yeah, that's right.
Yes, sir.
On one of your earlier slides, you had 3 to 6 hours of screening. And I'm asking myself, when do you do that? Do you do that during the course of a normal business day? Do you do it on a Saturday morning? When is that done?
That's gonna be up to working out, like, I think, Chuck asked it earlier, that screening meeting we're gonna talk about. I'm not gonna put that down as a specific date. I will get with your board president, and, board president will determine, as, he does with other meetings, when a special meeting will be held for screening.
For Dr. Beebe, we blocked out a whole day.
Weekday.
No, during the week.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, he said weekday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and since it takes some time, I mean, I remember doing it before. We opened it up and you had moved into executive session. And then the people weren't able to be there right at that moment. Since you were just reviewing documents that are held in executive session, they could come into and, go through things at a time. Depending if you were hung up in the morning or something like that, but we had a time frame where we could kind of go through docs before you took them.
It's important that it truly is important that everybody is at the next screening meeting, and we come up with a time where everybody is there, because it's not just about individuals looking at it, it's about the conversations you have.
Yeah, you gotta have back and forth, because you're
Yeah.
gonna be in agreement, and you're gonna be not agreement.
And then, Taylor may see something in a file that the rest of you don't see. And it's very important for somebody to say, hey, look at this, I think this is a real positive. If anybody else see this? And you may go, oh no, where is it? On page 8, if you look at the third paragraph, look at this statement.
Yeah, one of the fortunate things is
That's why that's
realistically, we may only be looking at 7 to 10 as opposed to full blown, where you're looking at 25, 30, 40. And you got an A/B file that's yay high and you got to go through each one.
So that's what the next meeting looks like. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I hope I have given you all the things you need. I appreciate you having us work with you, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Need a motion to adjourn if we could, please.
I so motion.
Taylor moves. Joe seconded.
All in favor?
Fine.
Aye.